What did you do? Okay, so now we are also recording the session.
Okay.
Is everything okay for you? Can you see us?
Yeah, I can see. It's not very clear, but it's good enough. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah. We finished the visit of Geshe Sherab in Cluj yesterday.
Okay. Tell me about it. I didn't know that he's coming.
He started the European tour in Germany, and we were the next country to visit.
Okay.
And he was in Cluj for 3 days, and I think everything was successful.
How many days was that?
3 days.
3 days. Cool. What was he
And
teaching about?
about compassion.
All right.
Compassion, yeah. He will go to Lisabona from Bucharest on the 1st of November. So he leaves Romania in a few days.
So did he teach in Bucharest as well?
Yes.
Oh, great. Wow. He did the whole tour. Wonderful. Right. Then maybe we can start by doing a little bit of kind of warming up meditation. So let's start by taking a conducive position as we explored last time. Try to sit as comfortable as possible. If you can, try to sit cross-legged, because this will give you a very stable sitting position. If you can do that and you can bring the knees like maybe to the touching the ground, then it would also be good to put like a cushion beyond your bottom, so it is raising the bottom, so then the knees are active, the weight of the body goes through the hips to the knees and gives you a very stable position. But anyway, if you can't do that, then whatever is your most stable and comfortable sitting position. If you sit on a chair, if you have a good position with your legs, if you sit comfortably. And then the second most important thing, as I said, was to sit straight and upright. Yeah, to have the spine completely straight. So this is important if you're sitting on the floor or you're sitting on a chair. In both cases, if you sit on a chair, try not to lean against the lean of the chair, but sit upright. Yeah, so the instruction is like to imagine the spine like being an arrow, straight like an arrow. Or another image is a spine like a stack of coins building a column. So check your body about this. How's your position with the legs? Are you sitting stable? Check if your back is straight. Most important thing, so that the energies of the body can flow easily and it's very conducive for the meditation. Doesn't make you sleepy and so forth. So you want to sit upright. And then you check your shoulders as well. If your shoulders are having some kind of tension or something, which is happening quite easily, if you feel like there's some tension, you move the shoulders a little bit, you can kind of raise them up and let them fall and so forth, in order to make them more supple and so forth. And then you check your hands. Hands are in your lap, such that the right hand is resting in your left hand and the thumbs are touching. It is also said that the arms should not kind of lie exactly against the body, so it's possible to have a little bit of space between the body and the arms. And the head is a little bit kind of leaning forward, yeah, so that you are able to put your fists still between your chin and the throat. In this way, you lean a little bit forward. If you lean too much forward, you get sleepy and drowsy, which is not conducive. If you're sitting, having the head too high, then you will have too much thoughts and will be too excited. So that's why we want to work with the level of the head as well. And then you check if the facial muscles are tense or if something has to be relaxed in the face, like the muscles on the jaw and so forth. Or something with the cheeks or around the eyes is possible that we have some tension. So we relax all of this, bring it into a normal state. With regard to the jaw, the teeth are naturally resting on each other in a natural state. They're not pressed together. Jaw is relaxed. And the eyes are ideally, they are half open, and you're looking like a meter in front of you onto the floor without kind of staring at what is going on there. You just have it open, so this again helps you to stay awake. And if you close them completely, this might lead to more drowsiness. So that's the instruction. In the end, you have to check out what's best for yourself. And then again, within the mouth, we check the tongue. We want to put the tip of the tongue to the palate behind the upper row of teeth. So if we do that, then it will stop us producing a lot of saliva, so we don't have to swallow all the time. And this way we have the most conducive position for the meditation. So let's take a minute to check our body through according to these 7 points and find the most conducive position. This way we prepare our body for the session. And then when we have prepared the body, we prepare the mind. So we decide to keep the mind here in that space, in that room, together with that group. We will stop the mind from wandering off to other places, to other times, to the past, to the future. We will stop the mind from worrying about the future or rethinking what happened in the past, analyzing what happened in the past, and so forth. We will also stop it from going to other places within Cluj or with somewhere else in the world. We're just going to rest the mind here in this room. This is the best place to be in this moment. We give ourselves a break. We allow ourselves not to plan the future, not to analyze the past, just to be here with this special group of people, a very conducive group of people. We just allow ourselves this break from constantly wandering off and decide to keep our mind here in this room with this discussion here. And if the mind wanders off, we're going to bring it back. And then in order to prepare the mind even further, to concentrate it further, we choose the breath as an object of meditation. And we place our awareness on this breath. So we can either focus on how the air is streaming in and streaming out at the nostrils, or we can focus on how our belly is raising and lowering again when we inhale and exhale. So whatever is most conducive for us in this observation of the breath. So we allow ourselves to deal with this neutral object. It's not very exciting, it's not very kind of entertaining, but we allow ourselves now just for some minutes to simply let our mind rest in a very peaceful activity of just observing the breath. And what we want to gain from this is we want to concentrate the mind, make it sharp and concentrated, very powerful in this way. And so therefore we observe the breath in this way, and if we find out that our mind has wandered off, then we gently, without making a drama or failure or something like this, we just gently bring the mind back to the breath. And if we find out that we are very drowsy or very sleepy in this meditation, then we also try to wake ourselves up. We can do this by, for example, visualizing a very bright light, like looking into the sun or something like that. But when the drowsiness has gone, then again we focus on the breath. We always come back to the breath. So we try to do this here for some minutes. If the mind wanders off, we just gently bring it back to the breath. If the mind gets drowsy, we wake it up by thinking about a bright light. And then we can use this pacified and concentrated mind, the space that we have created, in order to fill the mind with a motivation. So the motivation is about what moves us to do the following activity of being together here for 1.5 hours discussing Dharma. So first of all, it's good to remind ourselves that we are not here because we have to be here. We chose to be here. As a free person, we came here. And so we want to generate a motivation for this activity tonight. We want to listen with all our capacity, with all our concentration, all our intelligence, also our emotional intelligence. We want to relate to what is said on a personal level. So we decide to be focused and to keep the mind here in the discussion. We also decide to be engaged. If we have questions, we're going to ask questions, we're going to make remarks, we're going to analyze what is said and not just swallow it up. We're going to analyze and not just accept it because it is from the Dharma or something. And we want to do this because we want to take ourselves serious in our wish to be happy and not to suffer. We want to understand more about ourselves, where we are, what we are doing, how we are functioning, in order to find out how we can improve our lives so we can be more happy and deal with our problems and blockages more effectively. So let's try to establish this as the first motivation. And then we want to expand this motivation even further out of our understanding that everybody around us, all the other human beings and all the beings actually are in the same way wishing for happiness and don't want to have problems and sufferings. And so we would also like to learn as much as possible about the mind, about happiness and suffering, and how to deal with all of this and how to produce happiness in order to be able to more adequately deal with other people and to also bring joy and solutions to their problems, to their lives, and to help them in their struggle for happiness and the wish to be free from any kind of problems and suffering. So we also want to listen tonight with all our capacity and full engagement, with an open heart, without prejudice and so forth, in order to also be as useful as possible for others. And then with this motivation in mind, we can start the session and start a discussion. So we are actually here in this module about meditation. So I checked the material a little bit, what the module is about, and obviously we already talked last time that there is different types of meditation. There's concentration meditation. We did a little bit of this before here at the start, when we were just watching the breath. There's many different ways of doing this, but this was such a type of meditation. But actually, the most important one in our Tibetan Buddhist system, as presented here by the FPMT, by Gelugpa Buddhism, is the analytical meditation. Yeah, to some extent, this developing the motivation was a type of analytical meditation. So an analytical meditation is not just about concentration. It's about bringing the mind in a very conducive state. And then in this very conducive state, which is kind of a pacified state, also concentrated state, then go through Dharma thoughts with this special mind so that they can have a stronger impact. So when you go through the Dharma teaching, through the Dharma thoughts, then in this way, by going over it again and again, and again focusing on it, that when the mind wanders off, you bring it back and so forth to the thought, and you completely immerse yourself in this kind of thought process. At one point, the mind reacts to that and becomes from an intellectual thing, you get an emotional reaction. And so this emotional reaction, then you would kind of focus on. Yeah, let's say, as you had a teaching on compassion lately, if you would meditate on compassion, you would go through all the different teachings on why it would make complete sense to consider the other person similar to yourself and understand the other person's suffering and be compassionate to the other person and wish the other person to be free of suffering and so forth. So you would go through this kind of thought process or to these teachings and so forth. And at one point, it will happen that your heart opens to that idea, and you actually kind of start to feel compassion. So this is kind of two levels. You can, on the one hand, you do a meditation where you're actually introducing your mind again and again to that very topic. And so you can meditate on compassion by meditating on the teachings and the descriptions of compassion. But then at one point there is an emotional response, yeah, or like a mental response. You actually are generating a form of compassion. And so then you focus on that compassion that has arisen in your mind. So in that moment, you're no longer meditating on compassion in the sense of how it is presented in the teachings, but you meditate on the compassion that is in your mind. That's why at that point it becomes more like a concentration meditation. You try to stay in this mind of compassion. You simply familiarize your mind with being in that state, for example. So I think we talked about concentration meditation last time, and you all, I hope you were watching the video that the FBMT is giving to us for this module. So you had Venerable René Fussi describing quite in detail what you can do with this concentration meditation, what kind of level you can get to even. So I want to leave it at that, because I also saw that the Discovering Buddhism module here is definitely also focusing on the analytical one, on the analytical meditation. So for analytical meditation, you cannot just sit down and start meditating, but you need to meditate on that, what you have understood before. So it has a content. As I said, you have to think about certain reasonings in the Dharma, certain kind of teachings in the Dharma, and this you do with a very specific meditative mind. So it has a very strong impact on your continuum, on your mental state. So therefore, before we can do an analytical meditation together, although we already did something like that when we did the motivation, I first need to introduce certain kind of thoughts. So what I would like to work with you, what I would like to work on with you is a topic which is called the precious human rebirth. This is a topic that comes in the Lamrim, in the graduated path to enlightenment, in his teachings for Lama Tsongkhapa, and also in related texts. And it comes very early on, this topic. Yeah. So what this topic is about is, as it says, precious human rebirth. So we are human beings. So the topic is already indicating that it's going to be about rebirth. Yeah? It's saying that while we are human beings because we have been reborn as such. And we might not have been human beings before, and we might not be human beings after this life. So what we are experiencing right now is a specific type of life. We have a human rebirth. But further on, the topic is saying that it's a precious human rebirth. So this seems to say that it's not just an ordinary type of human rebirth, it's a precious human rebirth. Yeah. So this is the two things that we need to look, need to see. That take some Dharma investigation on these topics. So I would like to start with this part about rebirth. Yeah. So we talked about this a little bit, I think, when we were talking about the previous module on mind and its potential. We were seeing that the mind is clear knowing and nothing else, just that. It can be any kind of different form of mind. It can be different types of clear and knowing. We saw that even a mind of being complete in sleep or in dreamless sleep or being unconscious, even that is a state of mind, is a state of clear knowing, therefore. We saw that even hatred is a form of mind, and it is also clear knowing. And compassion is a form of mind, which is also clear knowing. So the mind is therefore changing a lot. It's actually an impermanent phenomenon. It's not something stable. It is not something that is fixed, but it is an impermanent phenomenon. It's changing due to causes and conditions, to the objects that we are observing and so forth. Different states of mind are generated. So that's very good, because that means that we can actually change our mind. The mind would be fixed. We would be just whatever we are, which might include the mess that we are, and we would just have to be like that forever, because we are permanent. Our mind is permanent. So that's not the case. The mind actually can change, and it does change all the time. You're different in a different mood now probably than you were when you were at work, or maybe you go to a school, I don't know. So whatever you did during the day, you went through many different phases. So this mind that is impermanent is changing all the time, and it is caused by previous moments of mind. Yeah, so there's a connection between what has been experienced before, what is experienced now, and so forth. And we were saying in this module on mind and its potential, how the mind is actually something very different from the body. It is not something physical, it is not the hormones, it is not the nerve system, it is not the eyeball, it is not the brain, and so forth. And we were maybe talking about things like that you have people who have out-of-body experiences, that people had operations, and when the doctors were clear that the person had died during the operation, the person was actually perceiving all of that. The person was later on, actually at one point the machine started to show life signs again, and the person survived the operation, much to the surprise of the doctors. And then later on the person was telling them what they were saying during that phase where he was heart dead, brain dead, and so forth. Yeah? So according to science, the body was a corpse. The body was dead. And there were mental experiences, there were perceptions during that phase. So this happens, seems like quite often, actually. So there's something like this, for example, which shows that the mind is a different substance or a different phenomenon from the body. And in general, the body itself is just kind of molecules and atoms. Yeah? And a single atom cannot think and feel, and many atoms can also not think and feel. So there's never kind of a change in quality such that the body at one point, or the matter or the atoms form would ever become conscious. So this very phenomenon that we have something in ourselves or about ourselves which is clear and knowing, which makes experiences, which has feelings, which has wishes, which is likes and dislikes and so forth, is something very, very different from our physical aspects, from our bones and organs, even from the brain. So that being said, we also looked at that, therefore, the mind has very different causes than the body. Our body is clearly coming from our parents, but our mind is not coming from our parents. It might be that we can clearly see that our character is very different from that from our parents. So our different character traits are not coming from our parents. So actually what is described in Buddhism is that previous moments of mind cause later moments of mind. So there's a mind that we have right now, and there is a mind that we can remember a mind when we were maybe like 10 years old or 5 years old. So this mind is connected to the mind right now. It's a previous state of this very mind. So it causes this previous mind when we were a child is causing the mind that we have right now. And it's not the mind of somebody else that is causing the present mind. It is the mind in our continuum. It's the mind of the 5-year-old that is causing the mind of the present person. But also this mind of the 5-year-old is not uncaused. It's in the same way impermanent. It is also coming from other causes. So the mind of the 5-year-old is coming from the 1-year-old. And the 1-year-old is coming from the very baby that has been born out of the mother's womb. But also that mind of the baby that came out of the mother's womb has previous moments. So these were moments of mind in the womb, of the fetus in the womb. And the fetus goes through amazing changes and transformations, and we can barely imagine what kind of experiences this must be of a fetus in the womb. But even there, it goes through many, many different levels, and at one point it is just different cells. There's no bones, there is no eyes, there is no how is it called, this cubical cord and so forth. Yeah. So in the beginning, the fetus is just like to some extent is a type of slime actually, and already there is moments of consciousness, is experiences, and then this goes back to the first moment when there's the fertilized egg, and there's consciousness there. But that consciousness is not different in its nature from all the consciousnesses later on, of the fetus, of the newborn baby, of the 5-year-old, of the present person. It is also something that has a cause. So the cause comes before the effect. So if the mind at the time of the fertilized egg is an effect, and its cause is again another mind, it must be a mind previous to that where there was no fertilized egg. So there was no bodily basis of this life whatsoever. It was a moment of mind before this life. So we cannot say what kind of life this was. It can be many different types of life. The point is simply this, that there was mind before this present body-mind complex. Before this present person, there was a different set of mind, which belongs, to speak in terms of Buddhism, to another life, a previous life. But even in this previous life, also that mind there, that would be then the mind at the end of that previous life, no? Where somebody was dying, yeah, in this previous life. So even that mind of this, let's say, old person or a dying person had previous moments of mind. So this dying person was a young person before. And the mind of that young person is in the continuity of this person who died. And this young person was born at one point, was a fetus at one point, there was a fertilized egg probably, and then there was a moment before that. So there is not only a life before this life, but there is even a life before that life, and then a life before that life, and so forth. And we saw actually that in Buddhism it is held that there is no beginning, that the mind is without beginning. So we have actually gone through myriads of different lives. Like myriads is even a small number in comparison to that what actually happened. We had limitless lives before. And we also heard that this is actually also working into the future. Also after this life, there's going to be a new life. You're going to lose this body-mind complex will end. This person in that sense will end. And instead, there's going to be a continuity of the mind into another life. And again, we don't know what kind of life this will be. So all of this is showing the incredible, how you say, flexibility of the mind. And also the creativity of the mind. The mind can form itself into very different types of life. So we might be, for example, a woman or a man in this life. But this is mainly because we have this kind of body. So this very body we're going to lose. And this very body we did not have when we entered into this life. And we don't know what kind of body we had in the past life. Maybe we were from the opposite sex. So we are a woman in this life. We might have been a man in the last life. We might be a man in this life. We might have a woman in the last life. So that's a very, very interesting fact, actually, when we are clinging always so much to our gender roles, like what a man has to do or what a woman has to do and so forth. Actually, all of this will completely fall off us the moment we die. And we came from somewhere completely different. So that's what the mind can do. It can go into different bodies together with the different hormones and the different body parts and so forth. And the mind is not fixed to being kind of the mind of a woman or the mind of a man. It is simply that which is clear knowing. It is simply experience. It is it's not simply something they can feel, that has wishes, likes and dislikes, and wants to be happy and doesn't want to suffer. Just that. But it goes much further than that. It's not just that we are not kind of bound to our gender roles, and the mind itself kind of doesn't have a gender, but that we are a man or a woman is dependent on what kind of body we took. But even to be a human being is not in the nature of the mind. It's not that we have a human mind such that the mind could not be anything different. The mind is completely flexible, can be completely molded into something else. So if you think about how bizarre that is, that you are coming from somewhere else, your mind is coming from somewhere else, you are coming from somewhere else, and there is this fertilized egg. I mean, a fertilized egg, what is this? This is some slimy substances coming together, and this is where the mind has entered. And because it has entered there, then the development of a fetus, of a baby, of a newborn baby, and so forth came along. But the start is very, very bizarre. That we are starting in this one cell egg that is fertilized. So if you understand that we didn't become a human being by way of having 2 arms and 2 legs and a heart and so forth, but by being a fertilized egg, and that's it. And then they split into two cells which are exactly identical, and then 4, and that's all what we were. So this is how we started. If you understand that this is what it means to become a human being, then from that level, from this point of view, it is not so bizarre to say, well, it could have been the fertilized egg of a fish instead, also some slimy substance. Or it could be the fertilized egg of a wolf or of a bear or what have you. Yeah? So there is just nothing about taking birth in a fertilized human egg that would somehow say that our mind can only be human. It can be many, many things. So what this wants to say is the mind has no problem to form out into the mind of a fish. And what I'm saying here is our mind has no problem to form out into the mind of a fish, of a cat, of a dog, whatever animal you meet, of a cow. We could be kind of identifying or connecting with the fertilized egg of a cow. And there we are born as a calf. And from that onwards, we stand there on this meadow and we chew grass. And that's it. So what that means, for example, is that if you're taking this kind of rebirth, if your mind is forming out by way of having lost the last life, going for a life, let's say, for a fertilized egg of a cow, that in that life, you will only also be able to produce the mind of a cow. So indeed, you will just be standing there and you will simply chew grass all day long. Apart from that, you're going to fight against the flies at your eyes and at your nostrils, if this is how you call this, a muscle, or what you call this. You will try to use your tail in order to get some control over the flies and so forth. You're going to drink and stuff. So you're going to do only things that cows are doing. You will not do philosophy. You will not do psychology. You will not kind of discuss with others about communication. You're not going to work with others together. You're not going to try to improve the planet or what have you. You're going to stand there and chew grass for a long life. Long life, like, I don't know how long cows are living, actually, I don't know that. But, this gives already a different taste to when you see a little calf. It is very cute, this little calf. But actually what it means that this mind, which has the potential to become a human being, and to explore its own mind and its own potential and to work with its mind and so forth, it has not become a human being, it's a calf. It's going to be chewing grass for the rest of its life. And then to some extent, luckily, it's going to die out of this life. This is true also for little, how you call this? You call this puppies? No, I call this the small dogs or small cats and so forth. So all these cute little beings, what it means is this mind has now formed into that level of consciousness. So the thing is that, of course, also animals have some kind of intelligence. You can train dogs and so forth, so they can understand. There might be some way of communicating and so on. There might be even mysterious ways of communicating amongst fish, for example, which obviously don't talk, but seem to have some communication going on. So anyway, there's a lot interesting stuff going on in the animal realm. But in the end, the fact remains that they are simply able to do things in order to work in a certain way, or to gain their food in a certain way, or to be successful in their animal lives in some way. They can never ever start to explore their mind or to meditate or to do that what you people are doing right now, which is kind of trying to understand more about your mind, trying to understand more about Buddhism, what the Buddha has to say, and so forth. Yeah. Actually, they're even lacking the capacity to simply communicate, communicate in the sense of learning a language with grammar and vocabulary and so forth. So that's a very specific human feature. So that's kind of when you meditate on this, when you think about that, that's pretty scary. The idea that our mind could become the mind of an animal. It's not going to be forever. You're going to die out of this as well. And whenever you die, there's a certain kind of chance that you might become a human again, and so forth. Yeah. But the important point here is that the mind has the capacity to take on all these different forms in their limitation and also in their bright, shiny form. Like not only can they become human beings, but they can even become completely enlightened. Yeah? So this mind can change into the mind of a Buddha. So the way this works is not that you are at the time of death opting for becoming a cow or opting for becoming a dog or something like this, but it is actually out of your hands. The process of reincarnation is happening on the basis of karma and on the basis of our afflictions that happen at the time of death. Yeah, at the time of death, we might get in the great panic of losing our body. We might get a very strong longing or desire or craving for having another body and so forth. And this might activate a certain karma that we have collected. And due to this kind of processes, nobody asks you what you want to be, but this kind of subconscious maybe processes, you will end up identifying with another fertilized egg. And then it depends on what karma has ripened, what kind of act you have identified with. So you could be a fish or a dog or a human being. So that's something already that you could do a lot of analytical meditation on. And it is something that is very useful because you can use it in your daily life. When you are seeing animal movies in the television, for example, you might get a different attitude to what you're seeing right there. And you might get a different attitude to actual animals that you meet, like cats and dogs on the street and so forth. Maybe you go into the countryside sometimes, you see some cows and so forth. So you can imagine that this could be me. I could be in that body. Yeah. So that's kind of funny on the one hand, but actually, if you think deeper, it's quite scary. That in my mind, there is the capacity to end up like that. So from that point of view, it becomes already clear that we are pretty lucky that we are human beings, because we could have been thousands of different types of fish. We could kind of roam the ocean in the body of a whale. My God, we could have endless huge bodies and just kind of cruise the oceans of this planet until we finally die out of this. Anyway, there's also cool movies on this. You don't want to be a whale when you saw these movies, you know. So it's kind of really, like, if you think about it, there is so many more species that are not human. That is a real surprise that we are human beings. So something must have gone very, very well in the past so that we had this kind of ripening of karma that we became human beings. So even from that point of view, already you could say it's precious to be a human, to have that kind of human rebirth. The thing is that Buddhism goes much further than that. It's Buddhism. The Buddha has to say a lot about other rebirths that are not visible to us. So in order to approach that, maybe we can think about what is going on in our dreams. Yeah, so we can have dream experiences where we are in completely different worlds, where we are experiencing pain or fear. We have like a nightmare. We have the feeling that somebody is following us and we're running and we can't get anywhere, or maybe we have a nightmare of being in a fire and we take this as real. Well, actually, there is no fire going on whatsoever. There's everybody coming into the room is not that can tell you there is no fire here. There's also nobody trying to kill you. There's no monster whatsoever. But the experience in the dream is very, very real, and the fear is very real, and the sweat that is coming out of the body of somebody who dreams like this is also very real. So the experience is complete. So taking this as an analogy, the Buddha is actually, so that's kind of difficult topic normally for people. The Buddha is actually talking about that it's possible to take a rebirth in what is called a hell realm. A realm, which is a rebirth which is completely full of pain. It can be pain of heat, it can be pain of cold, it can be pain of being sliced to pieces, all kind of horror scenarios. The Buddha says this is also possible. Due to a certain karma, it is possible that you're getting into a lifelong experience of that. So again, what I'm saying is this might be similar to having a nightmare. It's just that the nightmare doesn't end. So that's a possibility, which is called a hell realm. Then there's another possibility described where you're constantly experiencing, deprivation, like starvation and not having to drink, not having to eat, and so forth. So this kind of experience, again, this is called a preta realm. So the Buddha is talking about that. He calls that the 3 lower rebirths, as a hell being, as a preta being, or as an animal. So I already said that the other 2, the hell and the preta being, is not visible to us. It seems it is visible to high yogis who have special clairvoyances. They can actually see these beings in their state. So for us, for the time being, this is not the case, although we all have the capacity to gain this kind of clairvoyances. But what we can clearly perceive is the animal realm. Yeah? And the animal realm, actually, if you think about it, is not just about cats and dogs. It's not even about fish. It's about insects, really. So the animal realm is mainly containing of caterpillars and ants and, cockroaches and so forth. That's the animal realm. And we have the capacity to be born there. Actually, it's a very vast topic. And if you think about how ants are working together in a state, and they have a head of state, and they're building architecture, and they're building this kind of huge animal ant, how you call it, ant hills, and so forth. And they are very good in getting together resources and working together in the work field. And they're very busy and very industrious. Sounds familiar? You heard that before? That a society works together, has a leader on top, and is building all kind of architecture, and is very good in getting resources together and making things out of it. It's not so far away, people. You know? It's really kind of very similar to many of our minds. And of course, you don't have to be a Buddhist that you can understand that a lot about the human being is very animal-like, many aspects. So some people say like the human being is between the angel and the animal. Anyway. What about the angel? We will see. But anyway, there's a lot of things that we can, let's say, empathize or sympathize with regard to the animal rebirth, which might indicate that such a rebirth is very much possible to us. So this is this kind of the lower rebirth that the Buddha is talking about. It calls them lower rebirth because they are having an overflow of pain and of suffering. And so obviously this is what we want to avoid, as we always say, that the very reason why you study Buddhism, the very reason why the Buddha taught, is because we want to be happy and we don't want to suffer. This is what this is all about. And we want to actually live up to our capacity to be happy in a very fulfilling and lasting way, and that we want to live up to our capacity to be without problems, without blockages and so forth. So the lower realms are completely the other end of this. It's just full of problems. So the animal realm, for example, especially, is characterized that the beings in this realm are eating each other alive. If you think about what's going on, actually, when a lion is killing an antelope, it is not just a display of power and might and so forth, but this guy is eating the other guy alive. He brings down the antelope is still breathing, you can see this in the movies, and he's starting to eat. So that's what's going on in the animal realm. Of course, it's also going on with birds and insects and cats and birds and whatever. Yeah, so it's really kind of, that's a major thing there. So that's what's going on in the lower realms. Then the Buddha says there is also upper realms, realms above the human level. So there's different presentations about this. One way is to simply call all these beings up there gods. So that's another shocking thing, that Buddhism, which is supposed to be atheist, is talking about gods. So these gods are not gods in the way that we are normally thinking about God. God is normally a creator God that created the world and stuff like this, and he's omniscient and all-powerful and so forth. So all these kind of attributes are actually more talking about the Buddha. Buddha is omniscient. The Buddha is love and compassion without conditioning, conditionless love and compassion towards all sentient beings. He's emanating things and so forth. But the gods that we're talking about here is a form of rebirth. So again, you become a god because of a certain karma ripening. So just to keep this short, these god realms are kind of like paradises, and they seem to be like full of bliss in a form that is kind of is not known to the human realm. Yeah, there is joy and bliss in this upper realms in forms which are just unperceivable. So of course, as we're all running around all the time to get more kicks and consume more and have more joyful experiences, like on beaches or in saunas or in all kind of pleasure places and so forth, this seems to be the place to go. Wow, these gods, they have all this kind of bliss and so forth. They're wonderful. So the thing is, they are completely blissing out on this. They're almost like incapable of having a normal thought. They're completely gone. They're pretty much on a drug trip. They're completely out of themselves. So that's going to be the important point about the God realm when we talk about the precious human rebirth. I just want to right now present the variety of rebirths that are presented. So there are some gods who are actually using substances. They have access to all kind of wealth, and everything they wish for appears to them and so forth. There's other gods that are simply in a state of concentration. There's even gods that don't take a body. They are just concentrated minds. There's even gods which are not having any kind of discernment. They have worked with their mind such that the mind is getting completely blurry and so on. Anyway, already too much detail. There's all kind of levels up there, which is also referred to by the Buddha as the upper realm. So the upper realms is the human realm and the God realms, and this is because these upper realms are having much more bliss and joy than these lower realms. The lower realms being mainly full of suffering and pain. Maybe I can just say one thing, because obviously the God realm is also something that we can perceive just as the hell realm and the predator realm. But maybe you people have, I don't know if people have heard about this, in Dharamsala, where the Dalai Lama is residing, there is also oracles. Yeah? So there is people that are channeling something. Yeah? So in other words, they're being taken over by another being, and the other being speaks through them. So there's one oracle, so-called state oracle, the Nejong oracle. Yeah? So the Nejong oracle is such that it is actually a monk of the Nejong monastery. And this monk is, as far as I understand, a very pure practitioner, very pure monk and so forth, and has been chosen by that being that is channeled. So this being is a god. So this being is called Nejong, and this god called Nejong is channeled through this monk. And when they go into session, when this god is kind of channeled by this monk, then this god is actually speaking through this person. It seems to be very difficult to speak through a human body, so it is difficult to understand exactly what he's saying. So there's special monks around to write this down and so forth. But this is something. This is kind of the closest we can get to actually encounter a god. Yeah. So in Dharamsala, on a regular basis, there's a god descending into a human body and is speaking. So that's just on a side note to make it more palatable that there is this kind of god realms. So our actual topic here is the precious human rebirth. Yeah, so that's this actual topic. That the idea of the reason why we talk about the precious human rebirth is if we become aware how precious our human rebirth is, how rare our human rebirth is, what an incredible spiritual opportunity we have with having such precious human rebirth, then we will start to want to use this opportunity. Yeah, so in other words, it will enhance our spiritual practice, our spiritual curiosity. It will enhance our wish to take the essence of this life and so forth. And so that's very much necessary, because it is possible to waste this opportunity, to lose this opportunity. It is possible to have a precious human rebirth and not getting anything out of it. So that would be extremely sad, because to get a precious human rebirth is incredibly sad. It is it is incredibly rare. It is very rare to get a human rebirth. To get a precious human rebirth where you actually can practice Dharma is even more rare. So if that would not be used, would be very sad. So to some extent, you could say the Buddha is aiming at leading the sentient beings to get precious human rebirths in which they can practice the Dharma, so that they can actually change their mind and attain the happiness that they're looking for. So if you gain that, what the Buddha really wanted to get you to a precious human rebirth, and you have access to Dharma and so forth, and then you don't use that because you just do the same thing like animals would be doing, like procuring food, getting all kind of substances and accumulating them, working all your life and so forth, and then just aging and dying out of this rebirth would be very sad. So that's the actual intention of this topic, why you meditate on the precious human rebirth. So why is the human, or what makes the human rebirth so precious? So it makes it precious, a human rebirth is precious if it is enabling you to practice Dharma, to explore your mind, to understand what the Buddha is saying about our present state of affairs, and what he is offering in order to improve our state of affairs. How the Buddha is saying, actually, we all have Buddha potential. Yeah, all this pettiness, all this narrow-mindedness that we are experiencing, all these limitations in our life are not in our nature. Actually, we have the potential to become a limitless Buddha. So that's what the Buddha is trying to tell us, and then he tries to give us the methods in order to become such a limitless being as is our nature. So this is possible with a precious human rebirth. For this, you have to have certain factors in place. It's not enough to just be a human being, but you have to have certain factors in place for it to be a precious human rebirth. So there's different sources for this description. So one source is from the great Indian sage Nagarjuna, who made a list of 8 points, what is qualifying a precious human rebirth. And another source is from the also Indian scholar Asanga. He makes a presentation of 2 groups of 5. So anyway, I just would like to introduce this topic of the preciousness of our human rebirth by way of these 8 topics of Nagarjuna. So what Nagarjuna is talking about is, first of all, the precious human rebirth is qualified by being a human rebirth. So that's already essential. It means, 4 points, it is not a hell rebirth. It is not a preta rebirth. It's not an animal rebirth, and it's not a rebirth as a god. So if you have any of this first rebirth as a hell being, or as a preta, or as an animal, you are simply lacking the capacity to ever find kind of some leisure or some freedom or some space to explore your mind and to work with that what's going on in your mind and in your experience, because you're overwhelmed by the suffering that you're experiencing. Really hardcore, straightforward suffering of suffering. With regard to the animals, especially, it is said that not only are they suffering very strongly and have no space in that to reflect on anything, but they are also described as not having the capacity to do philosophy or to think. They're kind of limited in their intelligence. They're limited in their capacity to actually work with their mind. Yeah? So that's a special problem if you are in that realm. And then with the God realm, like if you have a precious human rebirth, you're free of being in a God realm. So you can practice Dharma because you're not in the God realm. If you would be in a God realm, you would have these amazing experiences and everything would be so blissful, and you would just bliss out. Again, you could not practice Dharma. You could not explore what's going on in your mind. You would not try to find out what's this experience that I'm having here and out about all the time with this kind of bliss. What's the cause for this experience? Is it kind of tainted? Is it kind of supreme bliss? Can I attain to higher states than that, and so forth? So the God realm is not kind of having anything of essence. It's just like sleeping through for eons and or blissing out for eons, and then in the end, these gods also die. Yeah, so they live for an amazing a long time, but then also they die without having gained anything spiritually. They have just enjoyed themselves. Well, they have enjoyed themselves for eons, but even eons at one point are over, and that's just it. It's just like when we had a very wonderful day. Let's say we were visiting a lake or with friends, and we had food and good conversation, and everything was wonderful. And then a week later, this doesn't matter anymore. It's just over. And we have whatever problems we are facing in the workspace, or maybe we get annoyed in a traffic jam or what have you. Yeah. So it doesn't matter that there was this perfect day 1 week ago. So in the same way, having been in the realm of the gods for eons doesn't matter in the end. There's no essence. There's nothing left from it. It's like a bubble that burst. So the gods are not able in their bliss to take any essence of their life. The human beings are described of having the right mixture between suffering and peace. So there, on the one hand, the human beings are kind of the upper end of the food chain, so they don't have to be constantly afraid to be eaten alive. They are not so overwhelmed by suffering that they're constantly screaming in pain like in the lower realms. They are able to for most people, it is possible to actually get together all their food and drink and so forth. Maybe there's healthcare, there's support and so forth to deal with the different sufferings that people have. So here in the human realm, the suffering is rather contained. With all the horrible things we see in television, with all the horrible things that people do to each other, still, in comparison to what's going on in other realms, it is pretty contained. It is doable. It is doable, it's manageable, such that you can find some space to use your intellectual capacity, your psychological capacity, your insight and so forth, to actually analyze what the mind is about, what your experience is about, what you're actually looking for, how karma works, what's happening before birth, after death, and so on. So you can actually do some spiritual work. In other words, you can take the essence of this life. Because this life will also burst like a bubble. You will also die out of this life. You will lose this life. Nobody will stay alive. Everybody will die out of this. This is the nature of this life. But the question in the end, when the bubble bursts, is, did you take the essence or not? Did you use the opportunity of your precious human rebirth, or did you waste the opportunity? So that's what is said here. The point is here that the human beings have enough suffering to get started on exploring where this is coming from. They have enough suffering and problems to be set on asking spiritual questions. As I said, the gods are just blissing out. They do not have enough suffering. They do not have enough problems. Nothing is startling them to ask questions about existence and so forth. So the human have enough of that to get going. And we said the gods don't have that because they're blissing out on all their substances. So one commentary that I read by a very famous Tibetan Geshe is such that he said, so you might wonder about the rich people in our world. And so the rich people, actually, if you think about it, is the people in the first world. It's the people who are not living in a third world country. They're not living in war. It is people who are not kind of suppressed by some tyranny or something like this, people who are not living in starvation and so forth, or in an area where everybody is completely sick of big diseases and so forth. So you might wonder if it's talking about us, actually. Yeah, that we are in a very rich state of affairs, very safe, have access to a lot of substances and gadgets and support and so forth. And so the question is, to some extent, do we have enough problems in order to get started to do spirituality? So that's something that we have to ask ourselves. Yeah? How's our state? How much interest in solving our problems do we actually have? And how much are we distracted by all the different entertainments that we have access to, like movies, or I know all these different kind of forms of entertainment or of distraction that our society offers to us, especially if you have money and can afford these. So how much are we actually drawn to explore our mind? I mean, you're all here tonight, so this is a good sign that you have some interest in this area. And again, I want to say this might be quite rare. Yeah, normally I always start saying like, there's probably no other group in Cluj who's doing this kind of discussion that we do tonight. So that's very, very cool what you're doing here right now. Yeah, so this shows you have some spiritual interest. You have some interest in what's going on in the mind and so forth. You are not just kind of taken away by all the distraction opportunities that your first world country is offering to you. So there's more to be said about precious human rebirth. But maybe that's the first thing to understand how a human rebirth is very special in that people can actually reflect on the spiritual state of affairs here with regard to the mind of somebody living in samsara. Because on the one hand, they're not overwhelmed by suffering or by pleasure, so they have enough space for that. And on the other hand, they're also intelligent enough to do this kind of analysis, right? So that's the first part of these 8 topics that Arya Nagarjuna is talking about. So I think there's already a lot in that to reflect on. So I don't know how to continue from here because it's 20 minutes before 7, which is where we stop normally, I think, isn't it?
Yes.
We stop at 7 now. So either I don't know if people have a lot of questions, then we can do some question answer on that topic that I was talking about. Otherwise, we could try to meditate a little bit. But maybe better to clarify questions about this, and then we can meditate on the topic next time. Does anybody have questions?
So if animals...
Can you come a bit closer?
So if animals are in a lower state, so to speak, isn't the fact that they eat each other a good thing because they're they shorten their life in that state so they can get to another state, maybe a higher one, faster?
Yeah, so that's like this would come down to we should out of compassion kill all animals in order to give them a chance, isn't it? So that's probably not what the Buddha had in mind. So actually, one of the major practices in Buddhism is ethical conduct, and one of the ethical conducts is not to kill anyone. So you could talk a lot about what does it mean when a lion is killing another being in order to survive. I guess it's still killing, right? So this is kind of accumulating negativity in the animal realm. Yeah, so from the side of this lion, so it's definitely something that is harming at least the lion. And so that's the one thing, yeah. So it's that the lion, like one animal eating the other one alive, is already not a good thing for the one who does eat alive, who does eat the other one alive, because this one is accumulating negative imprints and negative habits in its mind. And also for the being that is killed there, the thing is, it is, for us at least, unpredictable what's going to be the next rebirth. So it might go even lower. And there is a lot going on even lower. So there's a good chance to go lower. It is very, it's by comparison rather unlikely that it goes up. Actually, it goes so far that normally we have discussions about how does one ever get out of the animal realm again? How does one ever get out of the lower realms? Yeah, so normally the rebirths are leading from lower realm to lower realm, and maybe even worse and worse. So some people might say maybe if you go to the hell realm in the end, this is consuming so much of a negative karma that afterwards there will be a positive rebirth and so forth. But anyway, the whole thing is not cannot be predicted because the different beings have different karmas and so forth. I'm just saying this: if an animal, you could say like within the lower realms, an animal rebirth is quite fortunate. Yeah, so it would be good for this being from that point of view to stay there. And in general, of course, what this precious human rebirth is about a Buddhist point of view. So, in other words, a spiritual point of view. From the point of view of samsaric beings longing for bliss and joy and kind of, let's say, drugs and altered state of mind and so forth, the most joyful one is the God realm. So, from a spiritual point of view, you don't want to be in these realms. From a spiritual point of view, it's the human realm that is the best. So from just the point of view of, let's say, of a preta, he would love to become an animal because it's much less suffering there, and he would get his food and so forth. He would not constantly be deprived of the necessities of life and so forth. So you see, things are a little bit complicated here. You know? Like to say that it's good for this animal to be eaten alive because he gets another chance. Yeah, I see where this is coming from. I would have thoughts like this before, but as it is very unclear where this being is going next, then maybe better not to have this kind of ideas, because as I said, the logical consequence would be best to then kill all animals to give them a chance. Yeah, so I think we can all agree that this can't be the solution. Is that an answer?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions?
One more.
No. So what you say? Only the human room is the one in which we evolve. This is the only room in which we evolve.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, we can say that. So this is why there is this teaching on precious human rebirth. There might be the occasional God who can do that, and there's special cases of very specific beings in the animal realm. I think it doesn't make sense to go into this because it's so specific beings, so we can leave this out maybe. But there is talk about certain kind of gods and certain kind of levels that they can do this. But in general, yeah, like this would be happening for a god because he has a very strong dharma imprint from other lives. So I would say, like, if you don't have much of a Dharma imprint, then probably in the God realm, it won't happen there that you meet the Dharma and that you start there. But if you have some kind of inclination, let's say out of psychology, let's say out of another religion, I don't know, something like this, you might meet the Dharma here in this realm. So I think it might be, for example, a very good place to start with the Dharma. But anyway, in general, the human realm is described as being the main realm for spiritual practice. So if you kind of push it to say like, is there only spiritual development possible in the human realm? The answer would be not only there, but kind of mainly. And there's kind of exceptions where people do this also in other realms. So normally it's quite good to not kind of put your money on the exceptions, but rather kind of go for what is normally going on for most people. So for my own development, for example, it's I completely put my money on the human realm. It's even said that certain spiritual activities and certain spiritual realizations are only possible in the human realm due to certain reasonings and so forth. So definitely I'm saying, or this topic is saying, that the human realm is the best one for spiritual practice. Right? But there was a doubt for you with it?
Yes, it was a doubt. How about in the higher room, like in the God room? How you do it?
Yeah. Yeah, so that therefore it's quite important to imagine this to become clear about how these gods are blissing out. I don't know how what we can maybe get drunk or be on drugs or something like this, yeah. So they're completely gone, and also you might find people who are actually quite nice and friendly and soft-spoken and well-off, and they are enjoying their day, and they're getting up in the morning and they do some sports, and then they do maybe some cooking, and they're nice people and friendly and positive and so forth, but they would never start to analyze their mind. Yeah, so it's not that somebody is a bad person because he's not spiritual or something like this, but he can be enjoying life, he can be well off, he can be educated, yeah, and still he is so entangled in this kind of enjoyment and activities that he cannot start to actually ask questions, especially actually because his life is going so smooth.
How did you get in the God room if you don't know Dharma or you're practicing any other religion? You're not a Buddhist, you're not a yogi, you're not any other strong practitioner.
Yeah, I mean the karma to get into this to this God realms would be a very strong one. So one might wonder if you can do this without a religion. But anyway, there's many religions. It's not so not that the religions are something very rare. Yeah, the whole planet is full of these kind of religions. And in the end, it's not about what kind of philosophy they are holding. It's about what kind of ethics they are holding, what kind of practices they are doing. Like if a Christian is practicing generosity, if a Muslim is practicing ethics, if a Hindu is practicing concentration or patience, for example. Yeah. So all of this will have positive outcomes in the mind and will generate positive karma. If he does something very exceptional, yeah, let's say even giving his life in order to save somebody else and so forth, he will have a strong outcome. So yeah, of course, to be born in this human realm will have its source in some kind of practice, some religious or some psychological practice, but it doesn't have to be spiritual necessarily. It doesn't have to be something where you want to completely transform your mind. You might be just ethical, a good person, or very generous and so forth. Yeah. So you might not go so far like some of the religions are going in order to actually transform your mind to a very high level. So samsara is, for example, samsara is working also without Buddhism. Even if there's no Buddha Dharma anywhere, then still there's people becoming gods due to their good deeds and so forth. Yeah. In order to get liberated out of samsara, not to be born in any of these 5 realms, in order to become completely enlightened, for that you need Buddhism. Right. Another question, somebody?
Yeah, you said in one of the previous sessions that you start your next reincarnation with the imprints of your current mind, so to speak. Does that keep on for the second previous life? So do you have imprints just from this life or from more of your previous lives?
Okay, so you have you have imprints from all kind of lives. Yeah. So for example, right now we have all kind of karmic results. We have this kind. We have attained a human rebirth. We have some spiritual or psychological interest. We are living in peace. We have some financial support, maybe some social support also. And so forth. Yeah. So all of this is coming due to the ripening of many different imprints and karmas. Also, kind of how our character is, how our intelligence is, how our emotional intelligence is, and so forth. All of this is coming from the ripening of karma. So this is what we can see. What kind of results are there? So the more we understand about ourselves, maybe also the more we understand about others, and the difference between our setup and their setup, we can understand how there was ripening of karmas. But actually, again, very much invisible to us, we are carrying imprints of myriads of other karmas, which are a mere potential and have not ripened. And we're carrying them out of many lives, many lifetimes. What has ripened in this life has then also given its fruition. So it will not again ripen in future lives. We have become a human being in this life. If you become a human being in a future life, depends on other karmas. If we have again karma for other human rebirths, then this can happen. Otherwise, not. It's not because we had a karma for this human rebirth that we're going to have it again. The karma for this rebirth has ripened, is done with, is used up. So what that means is that while we are carrying the imprints of this life to future lives, the question is which of these many imprints of this life and of past lives is going to ripen first. So there's no guarantee that the imprints that we have of this life will ripen in the next life, unless we have done some very strong practice together with very strong understanding of our whole mind and samsara and so forth, and we are dedicating it with a very strong dedication to a certain type of rebirth and so forth. So apart from that, there's no guarantee that what the imprints that are accumulated in this life are ripening in the next life. Yeah. So there is a lot of discussion or a lot of teaching about how this karma works. What karma ripens first is normally the strongest one that is ripening first, yeah, and not kind of small actions that you did. So that's what's kind of going on. When I say that we're carrying imprints to the next life, does not mean that whatever we have done most in this life is going to happen again in the next life by ripening in the next life. Yeah, it depends on if there's other strong karmas or stronger karmas from past lives that are taking over. Okay?
What would be the imprints for having a human rebirth?
So with regard to taking a rebirth, this is especially connected to ethical discipline. Yeah, like so ethical discipline is talking about that you're refraining your mind, you're restraining your mind from doing harm, especially. Yeah, like killing or stealing or having improper sexual conduct, like rape and so forth, or lying or dividing people who were harmonious by your speech, or being harsh to people with your speech, or disturbing people in the spiritual practice by just chatting and so forth. Or anyway, there's this so-called 10 non-virtuous actions. So ethical discipline is abstaining from them. So in a moment where you could kill and other people might kill, you refrain yourself from this because you say, like, this is a negative action. I'm not going to do this to my mind. I'm not going to destroy my mind. I'm not going to kill the other person, make the other person suffer. I abstain from that. That's ethical discipline. That is collecting the karma for rebirth in the upper realms. And the opposite of that, engaging into non-ethical discipline, that by actual killing, by actual stealing and so forth, this becomes a cause for a lower rebirth. And then that's just kind of the substance out of which the respective rebirths are made. Like, let's say, out of the ethical discipline, there's the substance for getting a higher rebirth. but then it comes together with your dedication. Yeah, so that what you create there, this ethical discipline, this karma, and so forth, you can dedicate. You can make a strong wish for, may this not ripen in the God realm. May this only ripen in the human realm. Yeah, so there's something about dedication, which you probably also came across in the videos, and I think we also did a dedication here always in the end. No? So there's actually quite a practice in itself to do a dedication, to understand how your mind is producing virtue and positive substances, if you like, and how you can take that what you're creating here and also give it a label, saying like it's gonna be a spiritual rebirth, or you could label it made right for all sentient beings and so forth. Yeah. So that's the main thing to get a higher rebirth, and especially also here this human rebirth, ethical discipline. And then it's good to be born as a human, but you can see there's so many humans which are living in poverty and maybe downtrodden and so forth. So you want to have one in peace, one in security, and with enough financial resources to practice Dharma. So this is coming then from yet other practices. For example, from generosity, there's coming resources. From being patient, then this has the outcome that you have also a conducive surrounding or entourage, or you say like friends and so forth. Yeah. So there's this other practices as well to shape the details of that human rebirth. But in a nutshell, the main cause for human rebirth is ethical discipline.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right. This is the last chance to ask a question. Perfect. No questions. That's great. Yeah, so we didn't do the meditation today. I couldn't even cover all the topic that is included in this topic of precious human rebirth. So I don't know. What are you going to do in your next meeting? Are you going to meditate, or are you going to have a discussion on this topic, or maybe both?
Both.
Both. Okay. So the meditation is going to be concentration meditation or on this topic? On this topic?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's cool. Yeah. So then we just do that. You do your meditations there. Please also discuss this. And again, you know, like any of this, the Buddha always says, whatever I'm saying. So this means in this case what I'm saying here. Do not take this out of respect for the Buddha, or because it's Buddhism, or because it's what the Dalai Lama is standing for and so forth. But you need to analyze all of this. You need to put all of this into question. Yeah? If anything of this doesn't sit with you, analyze it, check it through, discuss it, and so forth. And if you feel like this doesn't make sense to you for the time being, you can put it aside. Yeah? You don't have to reject it immediately. Maybe it takes some time to penetrate this topic. But what the Buddha is aiming for is that you're taking his teachings, analyze them, and out of your own deeper understanding, then put them into practice. Yeah, so please do use these discussion groups for discussion and explore this topic. Yeah, so especially discuss if you think you can really become an insect, if that is possible. Could that be? And maybe that's then also something good to discuss, and then also maybe to meditate on. Yeah, you can do meditation like this, where you imagine how it would be if you would be a fish, or if you would be an ant. Maybe you can relate to that you could be an ant when you think about your work life. Anyway, so good luck with that, and then we see each other in 2 weeks, and that's already going to be the last session, the last teaching session for this module, isn't it?
Yes, you're right.
Okay. So then, yeah, all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you there. Bye-bye.
See you next time. Bye. Thank you. Thank you.